Hi everybody, I'm Stepha Doucet and I am the creator and host of Black All Year. And I know I say this every time, but Black All Year was something that I created because what I would find is that people were really keen to talk about Black issues and experiences during October, Black History Month, but then the rest of the year tended to forget about it and move on to something else. And I used to say, well, surely we should be talking about this stuff all year round because we are Black all year. And nobody did anything about it. And therefore I thought, well, then I'm going to have to. And that's how this was born. So we have online live events. We have a podcast. So this will be available as a podcast and also on YouTube. So if you are listening or watching, please like and subscribe because it means that you will get to see future content. But it also helps other people find the content as well. So it's really important. So today I'm delighted. We have Martin Hilton with us. Hi, Martin.
Hi, Steph.
And Martin began dancing as a child by joining the Hare Hills Youth Dance Club and then went on to train at the Northern School of Contemporary Dance. And I probably shouldn't say this because it gives away your age, but in 1998 was named the CNA Cosmopolitan Young Dancer of the Year. After graduating, he joined Nike Carte Blanche Dance Company in Bergen, Norway, and then went on to work and perform with companies such as Skanes Dance Theatre in Malmö, Sweden, and Marie Berlin in Tani in Aarhus, Denmark. And I don't want any corrections on my pronunciation of those places. Martin has also worked and performed with various companies in the UK, including Phoenix Dance Theatre. And he's built really strong connections with industry. He's taught contemporary dance throughout his career all over the world in professional, educational, custodial and community settings. He holds a master's degree in arts, business and creativity and is a CLAW fellow, having completed the leadership program in 2012. And he founded Gateway Studio CIO in 2012 in Gateshead, which is a project which offers wide community dance program while supporting local professional artists. And there's a whole lot more I could have said about you there, Martin, but I know people feel really uncomfortable when we start to talk about them. When you hear your kind of whole CV described in front of you like that, it's quite impressive.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it is a little bit weird to hear it, but I guess when you start getting to these ages, you realise you've done a lot more than you can remember.
Yeah, but you should own it. You should own it. So tell us, how did you get into dance in the first place, Martin? What was it that took just probably what a lot of people do when they're young, which is dancing around in their sitting room and with their mates and things? What took you to do that?
I was really, really lucky. So in our school in Hare Hills, creative dance was part of our physical education curriculum. We had a fantastic teacher called Nadine Senior, and she decided that creative dance helped a lot of the pupils in the school just get in touch with their creativity, really, and everything developed from there. And the headmaster at the time was very supportive. It was one of those environments where we would have a school production at the end of the year. Well, the production would involve the metalwork, woodwork department. It would involve home economics. They'd do the costumes. It'd involve the music department. So it was one of those projects, one of those things where everyone got involved. If you weren't interested in dance, you could help do the lighting, the staging, those kind of things, build the set. So it was a whole school project that took up much half the year. So everyone at the school had to partake in dance as part of physical education. But then, when you got into the later years in the school, you could make a choice. And if you chose dance, obviously you were in the warm. And I say that, I'll explain that in a minute. And you could join the youth group, Hell's Youth Dance. And for me, I think the moment when I decided I'm a softie. We were playing rugby on a frozen pitch. I remember getting tackled and grazing my eye in these shorts on this frozen pitch and looking into the school building and seeing everybody in the warm dancing. I was like, nah, this is crazy. I'm too tough for this. And I chose dance and that was it. Never looked back since.
And I mean, that's really progressive that the school was doing dance for everybody, because I was just talking about this at the weekend, but just how gendered things can be in schools. And it's kind of like, oh, well, the girls can do dance and the boys can do rugby or whatever. And that still happens. And even in 2023, you still have that it's kind of boys aren't allowed to do dance, because why would they want to do that? And girls aren't allowed to do other things. So having that kind of environment where everybody was encouraged to do it, because it is great physical exercise, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know what, I think a lot of that is to do with how we deliver dance and the perspective around it, how people view it. When we started, dance was about storytelling, using your physicality. So, you know, we would have themes like,
oh, your voice dropped out there. I didn't hear you.
We would have themes around like boys, a game of cricket. You know, and obviously all the boys were interested in cricket. So yes, I guess today it would be football. But back then, you know, the West Indies was like slaughtering everybody. Everybody wanted to be Viv Richards, so cricket was the thing. You know, so the themes around the creativity were across the board interesting to both young men and young women, and we would alternate. And a lot of the themes, not gender based, you know, they were just good stories, good themes, good games that everyone could get behind. And it was strange because at that time in Leeds, you know, it was probably more boys than girls interested in dance. It was one of those things at Hare Hills where actually you were more prone to getting bullied if you wasn't dancing, because dancing was the thing. It was like, if you wasn't dancing, it'd be like, no, you have to get involved. So then you'd go do the lighting or something. It was all the best runners, the best athletes, the best football players, rugby players. They were all the best dancers, and it was in our day. It was a cool thing to do. And it was the in thing. If you weren't dancing, you were missing.
Yeah, and it's that thing, isn't it, of the difference that a good teacher can make. So actually in making something cool, something that people want to do, and it just creates this kind of community where everybody wants to be a part of it because it's fun. And I love that idea of getting all the different departments involved in the production. So, because not everybody wants to perform, but actually you can still be a part of this thing that is really good and really great. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, dance, I think one of the reasons that I love dance so much is it can be so many things. So it can just be something that you sit and you look at and you go, oh my God, that's beautiful. Or that's, you know, that makes me feel angry, or whatever emotion it is that it stirs up in you. But I think a lot of us forget that it can actually be very narrative as well. It does tell stories. And I mean, as a ballet teacher, I would automatically go to the ballets because that's what they do. They are telling a story through dance. But a lot of people forget that. They just think it's kind of what you see when you see kind of commercial dances where you go, oh, that's really clever.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think especially when it comes to contemporary and modern dance, we always go for fads, you know, and I think modern dance went through this very abstract phase where everybody would, you know, go and see a show and be like, what was that? You know, have no idea. You just see bodies flying around the stage and a bit of sweat here, and you know, and it'd be like, it's almost like you would have to have serious knowledge about what modern contemporary dance is really about. And it went through this really abstract phase where it was just about physicality and direction on stage. And I think a lot of audience members were at a loss as to what am I watching? And I would agree with most of that. I was at a loss most of the time, especially coming through as a young pupil who was very much into the story-based dance.
Yeah.
You know, it was, I mean, it's changed. Again, we've gone through lots of different paths, but then we went through, especially in education, dance education, both in schools and in the community, where it was all about issues-based work. That's the only way you could reach kids. was through issue-based work. And I kind of disagreed with that in a bit, which is strange because all my work is issue-based. But, you tell stories for fun, and use movement and be able to enjoy it. I think we need a bit of both.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like I say, even when it is narrative, no matter what the narrative is, people are feeling emotions as they're watching. And that combination of the music and the movement, I think, just adds to that whole kind of experience that an audience will go with you. So you decided, was it 21 when you wanted to bring together a group to create Inner Gods? Was that when you set out starting it?
Yeah, it was. So I've had this idea of creating a piece of work for quite a while. So all my work is usually like small sections that I put, small little vignettes that I put together to make one whole story. So I've been working on something, an idea, but I didn't really know what it was. And I'm also interested in technology. So we were lucky enough, 21, that we got funded by the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. And it was just coming out of COVID. And what I was supposed to have done was use that funding to look at dance and technology. And we were going to use some tech. I was going to work with, I'm not going to say the name, but I was going to work with a local company. But that ate up all the budget. And coming out of COVID, I thought there were a lot of artists that really needed work. So I called the funder up and I was like, I don't want to, it's a great idea and I think it'll work. I would much rather pay real people than pay one company to bring all their tech. And they said they were happy with that. That was great. But coming out of COVID, we had George Floyd, we had the Black Lives Matter movement. We'd created in the Northeast, we'd created the anti-racist statement to denounce racism, and all these were still in the back of my mind. They were all floating around, and I guess I needed some healing as much as everybody else, and I wanted to bring as many Black artists could that maybe wanted to work with me as much as I wanted to work with them into a studio to create some work. I think that was my motivation behind it. So we could have a space where we were, and I don't want to say it's safe, because that's not what I mean, but it was an environment where we had a majority collective voice. Not everyone in the studio was Black, but the majority was. And it was a collective voice where we could share aspects of our cultures, had a commonality. We weren't having to curb parts of our culture to fit into a space. It could just be. And I think that was the motivation, really.
Yeah, and I think that thing, it's something that it's come up a few times when we've done these events around the comfort that there is when you are with people and who are the same as you or similar to you. Nobody's like the same, but similar to you, in that you don't have to explain. You don't have to moderate. You don't have to tone down. You can just be you. And actually, quite often there's almost a shorthand, isn't there, that you kind of you can just say something and people know what you mean. I was having a conversation with some women, and we were talking about aunties, and we all knew what we meant. Whereas if I sit with a group of white friends and we talk about aunties, it's a completely different thing altogether. So having that similarity just makes things easier.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, we share so much. I mean, within the diversity of us all being African, Caribbean, and then within the islands within the Caribbean, there's so much diversity within us as Black people, but there's so much that is so common between all of us, you know, and we get to share that, to learn. I even learn, you know, down to the little things where it's like if we're rehearsing and I've given a correction 2 or 3 times and it's not being heard, and then it's like, yo, brethren, everybody hears the drop in the bass of voice and everybody knows it's like, yo, that's it. It's come to a point now where it's like it's important, you know. So just little things. Whereas if I was in a different studio with someone else, I couldn't do that. I'd have to explain and explain, but they just hear, you know, it's some of it's hard to explain because I think it actually goes beyond goes beyond words. I think there's something that is not quite as tangible, but something very spiritual about that connection that we have and those small nuances that sometimes are really difficult to explain.
And some people might think it's strange when one of the things I talk about a lot is the value of diversity, that I'm talking about actually those Black only spaces being really important. But I think what you've got to remember is that for most of us, the majority of our lives are spent in white spaces. We're not in Black spaces. So it's almost like we've got this kind of release, haven't we? It's that kind of, it's like you breathe out, you kind of go, I don't have to be that alert and aware all the time. And maybe that's where some of that almost spiritual connection comes from, because it's kind of actually, we're all in that space. We're all experiencing that thing of not having to be on alert, not having to be aware all the time.
Yeah, totally. And I think, you know, I count myself as extremely lucky. You know, I come from a community in Leeds. You know, I come from that community in Leeds. The school I went to was very diverse. When I danced for Phoenix, in those days, Phoenix Dance Theatre was Phoenix Dance Company. It was an all-Black company, and those dancers in that company gone to Hare Hills with. You know, I'd grown up with these dancers, so I know I spent years dancing in a Black space. And that's what I was used to. You know, there's nothing quite like it. It wasn't like going to work. You might as well go to the pool hall and play pool all day, because it's not like work when you're in those places. Yes, you work hard because, you know, the quality and the level of Phoenix Dance Theatre was, you know, it's one of the best companies in the country, if not Europe. So the quality of the work was absolutely phenomenal. But at the same time, we could work in a fashion where it didn't feel like work, because you were at home with people that you considered to be family. You know, lots of blood, lots of sweat, lots of tears in between, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't that emotional drain of constantly having to navigate, of constantly. And you know what the hard thing is? It's like in other spaces other than our Black spaces, you don't realize how much you are looking after everybody else. You have to look after them so they don't feel away. You know, you have to, it's almost like you're constantly having to support them, you know, for that. I'm going to say it for lack of a better word, for their weaknesses, for their lack of experiences. You know, and we constantly make this excuse that it's like, you know, you're going to have to be tired of my angry face. I'm sorry. It's just, you know, it's one of those things. Whereas in a Black face, that angry face is just like, what, really? You know, crack on. You know, it's more than that cultural thing. But I think we need to acknowledge that actually we do a lot of supporting in spaces that are not ours, and we take the burden of it. It lands on our shoulders, and that's unfair. And I just wanted to create a space where we didn't have to do that.
Great. Yeah. So you brought together this group of Black performers, because they weren't all dancers either, were they? No. We have this saying in our studio: there's no such thing as bad dancers, only bad dance teachers. And I think I had to prove that. So yes, we had a
a cast of, there were some dancers. I think one of them was a trained dancer and were in training. Wayne McDonald was an actor. I think he was the one with the least dance experience. But yeah, it was because we tell stories. Oh yeah, we also had Kem McKay. He was also an actor. Kem, he hadn't much dance experience either. So no, we work with everyone. That's why Gateway Studio doesn't have dance in its title. Yes, we use dance as our base, movement as our base to tell stories, but we enjoy being able to do it how we want to do it and take away this snobbery of, I trained at this place and I trained at that place and I'm this and I'm that. Oh, no, we're all the same when we come in the studio. It's like, I don't really care how well you dance. If you can't take care of the people you're working with as artists, then maybe this is not the right company for you.
Yeah, it's really, really important. And I should tell my one of my colleagues that phrase, because he says he can't dance, and I said, somebody's told you that you can't dance when you were young, and he now feels he's mortified if he ever goes anywhere and he has to dance because he believes he can't. And I said, you may not be conventionally stylish as a dancer, but if you can move, you can dance. So
absolutely.
So Inner Gods, how did you go about? Was it a piece you've choreographed? I think it was co-created almost, wasn't
it? All my work is collaborative, and I think, to be honest with you, most choreographers would admit that their work is collaborative. I mean, you have a base idea, but you get into the studio and you work with what you got. And if your artists are generous, they're always offering ideas, they're always offering solutions to the problems you face, trying to bring your ideas to the vision. So yeah, I've got to say, everybody will contribute in the making process. But there is an idea, there is a vision behind all of it, and then it comes to the question is, well, how are we going to represent this? And then through conversations, through mini workshops, we kind of find a baseline, find an idea, and then I guess my job is to try and tweak that to keep the storyline going and speed that up, slow that down. Can you do that a couple more times? It really is more directing ideas, more than going in as a choreographer and telling people, put your right foot in, your right leg out, in, out, in, out. No, it's yeah. So it's definitely collaborative.
Mm-hmm. And you've got some really hard-hitting themes in Inner Gods. So let's talk a little bit about some of those themes now. So what were the things that you really wanted to examine when you were creating this?
And I'm not sure I knew all of it at the time before we started working. And I think some of these themes came out as we worked. But it was around the conversations that I'd had with various people during lockdown. So that loneliness, isolation, the fact that so many businesses shut down, especially the hospitality industry, where people would gather, after work or at the weekend, to have a chat, have a drink, have a laugh. So the lack of being able to do that, and I think that really hit home for me because I've got 3 kids, and we've got a garden, and we were so blessed to have that because we had friends that only had 1 child and they had no one to play with. They didn't have a garden, they were stuck in high-rise buildings, and we felt really blessed by that. So we could see the pain of some of our friends and what they had to go through, and so that was one of the things I wanted to highlight, the isolation of it, and the mental health issues that went along with that isolation. I mean, people can feel lonely, in a crowded room, but it increased over and those conversations that you are having with yourself, and when you're questioning yourself, you're second guessing yourself for your existence. these were all born of conversations that I'd had with people. Alcoholism, I know a lot of people, including myself, had talked about how much their alcohol consumption had increased during lockdown. And I wanted to explore that a little bit. And friendship and love. Those kind of archaic kind of themes that are in every story, and how they pan out. And because it's based on one character and the manifestations of that one character, it was about all of these gods that we have inside of us that create our reality. These gods. I don't know. It's a bit strange because I'm Jamaican, right? So I always have this thing about I'm dual heritage. So in my house, it's Jamaican, yeah. And then when I go to school, it's England. So in my house, my name is Wayne. Everybody calls me Wayne, right? But when I go to school, my name is Martin. So I have almost like these two personalities, and depending on which environment or situation you put in, depends on whether you meet Martin or whether you meet Wayne. Yeah. So so for me, and I admitted this to myself for ages, I've got two personalities. So to have this character who conjures up all these people, he is all these people. All these people are him. Going back to the I and I, we're all one. Because we all felt locked down. We all had our little part to play in lockdown, whether we upheld every single rule or we did a Boris. It's yeah. So I guess it all manifested in the film.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, you want to think yourself lucky that you're Jamaican. Try being Ghanaian. You're a lot more than 3 if you're Ghanaian. I've got about 5 names going. And your main kind of character is a young Black man who through the piece you do see all of that. And I think the fact that you can tell me the fact that you chose to have a Black man as the main protagonist in the piece, and that you are addressing issues like alcohol dependence, like mental health, because there are some real issues within our communities around mental health in particular, and Black men. And I think you're right. I think lockdown for me really highlighted it. I know you're part of the walking group that takes place for Black men. And just before the lockdown, I was trying to set up a group for men to come together to talk, Black men to come together to talk, and just a space for them, because there wasn't anything. So let's just look a little bit at that kind of the choices that you made around having that Black man addressing those themes. Is that because you're a Black man, or was it more complex than that?
No, it's very personal. You're right. I'm a Black man. You know what? One of the first comments that I got when we first screened the movie was, but isn't that all communities? And white people and white men go through the same thing. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. But you've got lots of places to go and talk about it. That's the only difference. That is the only difference. You've got lots of places to go. You've got lots of support groups. You've got lots of help, and we don't. And that's it. It's as simple as that. And it's not waiting for someone else to do it, like you set up Black all year. You can't wait for someone else to do it. So let's do it. And let's do it as creative artists, as opposed to a formal kind of group where I've got to get someone in who, is qualified to deal with the trauma. I'm not a doctor. I'm not qualified to talk about mental health in any other aspect than through creativity. Mm-hmm. And that was the tool I used to kind of bring some Black men who are all creative art individuals into a space to say, let's tell a story and let's have a look at this. And through the development and the devising and the mini workshops that we did to try and find the root of the story, of what we wanted to actually say, we all realized we had much more to say about it to each other and support each other in that room. So literally, if we never produced the film, the journey was enough.
Mm.
And I can't stress how much the journey and the creation and the time we spent together, how much that was healing in itself, as opposed to coming up with this product at the end. We always have this argument as practitioners, as artists, you know, product versus process, you know. But I think we managed to have a great process and come up with a great product. You know, we got it right. No artist is 100%. No artist create great work every single time. Sometimes you're going to create a dud, you know. But this one works. It was, and because of all the issues and the way we worked, each section is so very different. There isn't one genre throughout the whole of it. It just changing. Because that's who we are, and that's the environment we live in. You know, everything's different. You put your headphones on, you listen to the music you want. You go shopping in town, you're listening to what they tell you have to listen to, and they're telling you that this is cool. You know what? I had to get. I'm not going to go any further with that one.
Just to pick up on something that you said earlier about it's no different. I think it is, and I think this is why it is different. So yeah, we all have to deal with work and sometimes no money, and we all had to deal with lockdown, and we all had to deal with the isolation, and but if you just think about 2020, we also had to deal with George Floyd's murder, and that hit us as Black people differently to the way it hit white people. And it was built upon decades and centuries of discrimination and abuse and marginalization. So yes, we encounter similar things, but it's building on the kind of trauma that we've had from existing in the environment in which we exist. And I think what I find really interesting is when I talk to people who were born overseas and now live in this country, and they'll say to me things like, I didn't realize I was Black until I came to the UK.
Yeah. So
the issues that we see as part of our, this is just what it's like. It's not what it's like. This is what the environment around us creates. So then all of those daily grind things that hit us and affect us are built on top of that, and therefore it's a lot worse.
Yeah, I think the conditions and the circumstance for the trauma is absolutely on a different level. But what I meant with me by saying to that elderly white man who said that to me is like, I can't talk to you about your trauma. You're telling me you're hurting. I'm going to take your hurt and just hurting. His reasons for hurting, I don't know. So it was really, me saying that is almost like, you got a head injury, you got a head injury. Whether you slipped and tripped and banged your head on the wall, or whether somebody hit you with a baseball bat, still that injury. And so I don't have time to argue with them or go into detail. I'm not having that conversation. I think you're absolutely right, don't get me wrong, but it's not a conversation I'm going to engage with when somebody comes to me with that. And there's, you know, very clearly when we're talking about, I'm not going to engage. Yes, you're right. You've got places to go there. We're not dealing with that now. So it wasn't that it's not that I disagree with you at all, Steph. It's just not a conversation I'm prepared to engage with when you come to see my work about Black men.
Yeah, it's that whataboutery, isn't it? That just is annoying.
Sorry, before you move, it's almost like, for me, it's almost like doing a performance and I'm physically performing on stage. and an audience member jumping up and going, look at me, and trying to dance in front of me. It's never going to happen. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's a time and there's a place for that, and we've carved out this chunk of space and time for us. And luckily, I'm in control of this narrative, and you are not. So you can take that somewhere else. And that's not me being. I just want to be really clear, because we say we do lots of work from a Black British perspective, but not exclusively. So we're not saying white people can't come and work with us. We're not saying white people can't be a part of us, but you have to understand the Black British perspective, because growing up, we have a lot of white friends who've grown up around and amongst our culture too, who understand a lot, and it's like, I can't turn around to some of those people who have been good friends to me from year dot and go, sorry, this is about our culture and you're not part of it anymore because we've had so much trauma. I've got to find a ground for me personally, and I understand if people disagree. I'm in control of the narrative. Well, it's my work, it's my space, and it's me taking ownership of that. And I think a lot of other organizations, a lot of gatekeepers hate the fact that we can turn around and just say it as it is. I own my narrative. Doesn't matter if you give me work, because I've grown up in a creative environment. I've grown up in an environment where they innovated. They innovated Phoenix Dance Theatre. They innovated at Hare Hills School. They innovated at the Northern School of Contemporary Dance. I've grown up around innovation within the art sector. I will create something. And yes, I want to get paid, and everybody needs to eat food on the table. But if we wait and wait and wait for that handout, it's never going to happen. I'm one of the most experienced Black artists in the Northeast in terms of contemporary dance. I couldn't get a job. I started Gateway. That's why I'm the founding director of my own company. I had to start. I couldn't wait for handouts. I couldn't wait for someone to authenticate my life and my existence. I sound a bit bitter now, don't I?
No, well, I completely empathise with you, because one of the reasons I stopped on my route was because I thought I'm probably going to end up being a waitress for the rest of my life if I do this, and I gave up on my performance streams. I've since gone back to it, but because that was my reality in the early 90s, that was just not going to happen because of my ethnicity. And I think it's really, I completely agree with you, and I think it's really interesting as well. Because what would be the reaction if a Black person went into a performance piece where white people were performing and said, well, it's the same for us as well, but you haven't featured us in this? Because that's in effect what they're doing, isn't it? Saying, well, you're not so special.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to invite people to, if they've got any questions or anything they'd like to say, and I will say as well, I am going to share the links to the documentary, and I'm going to share a bit of the documentary in a moment, and to the performance piece itself. So if you haven't seen it, you can be able to watch it. But there's a piece, and when we first met in person, because we'd kind of been around virtually things for a while, but when we first met in person and you shared the documentary with me, and it was this piece towards the end of the documentary that really hit me. And I'd like to share it with people if people will be a little bit tolerant of me. Yeah. So you probably see that got me a bit emotional, and I've watched it a few times now, and it always hits me. And I think it's just, thank you to the people that were speaking there just about their honesty there. But to me, that kind of says it all. It's like we were saying, it's not just about that incident. It's not just about what's going on now. It's about everything that's gone before and how that impacts on us.
Yeah, I think you were touching on that a little bit earlier, about the context we live in. And yeah, it's, I mean, how do you explain the hundreds of years of neglect, and the trauma that goes with that? And I think we just have to keep evolving, navigating our way through it, and make the change for ourselves. It's for example, here at Gateway now, we're looking at, I'm going to, wrong terminology, I know, but it's a trauma-based workforce, or how we as an organisation understand trauma, and how we work with that understanding. Everybody who comes through our doors. So that's the next thing for us as an organisation, that we want to look at, because it is a huge thing, and it's how do you address it? And for us here, for me, it's about just taking everything a step at a time, and giving thanks for the things that we are in control of, and we can change, we can impact. And I'm not going to go as far as to say accept, but understand the challenges that are maybe too big for us at this very moment. It might not be too big for us to deal with tomorrow. We'll do what we can today and see where we're at tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. And I think that being able to use something like dance and performance to actually confront and explore what are some really difficult and challenging topics, and hopefully bring them to people, like say, that older white man who might not have experienced or even had to think about any of that before. I think is a really important thing to be able to do, because some people will listen to stuff like this, a lot of people won't. Some people will watch a performance and they'll feel and see the stuff that comes from that. But also I think there's, the more different ways in which we can bring and have that conversation so that people can engage with it, the better. So it'd be really great to kind of see what comes next and what comes out of it.
You know what? I think it's really a strange place to be, because I think it's a quality work, but yet still there's no real platform to share that quality piece of work. I think the artists have done an amazing job, and the honesty, integrity, but there's nowhere to platform that work, and so there's going to be a small handful of people that will get to see it, and that's a shame. And so it's like, well, what do we do? Haven't got a platform, or there's nowhere we go, then we have to create it for ourselves. Where is that platform? So you being part of that by allowing me to come and today, which I totally give thanks for. Thank you. But we have to build up our own networks, our own platforms, because there will be no accolades for inner gods. It's a shame some of the performances, Ego's performance, because the main character is absolutely phenomenal, let alone the final product. But for 2 days of filming, to go through a range of those emotions that he shows in every section as an artist, phenomenal work. But how are we going to recognize his work in that? How are we going to celebrate it? So I think this is just the beginning. It raises a lot more questions than it answers. I know that. But I think the challenge is on. The challenge is on. How we need to support other artists, support individual artists, support organisations, and we need our own platform. Because otherwise, how are we going to be celebrated?
And one of the things I will say that I do know, because I'm a bit nerdy like this, so I do occasionally look at where the podcast is listened to, and it is listened to in a number of countries around the world. So you never know what, where let's say I'll put the links in the show notes and things. So you never know who's going to watch it and who's going to pick up on it. So, if you've got the
Thank
means
you.
to give it a platform, then give it a platform, because it's well worth it. So in terms of the piece itself, and then like I say, the themes that are embedded in it, we've got that issue of the mental health. We've talked about addiction. There's the other bits though. Let's end on a positive note around that hope and joy and happiness. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I've got to talk about the domino sections and Windrush. I've got to talk about it because it is that community. It was that enjoyment of, and I'm going to say black men, but I'm going to, black men and women, because I've seen some phenomenal female domino players, right? So it's not exclusive to men, trust me. But that joy of being able to sit and engage conversations, joke, laughter, entertainment with each other. And as a child, that's what I saw my father, aunties and uncles. That was the way they came together. So for me, and especially that's the fun side of it. And yes, it does escalate with cussing and swearing and all the rest of it. But it's pure jokes. It's all jokes. But that was in the context of the Windrush scandal here in the UK, which I think we were talking about this. Had my father refused to do it, had my mother not gone and got her papers, they could have been sending me home. Mm-hmm. It was one of those. And just being able to enjoy that, because that was a great part of growing up and being around the elders and the community. So, and then towards the end of the piece where he conjures up all of his friends, and they were doing the electric slide, and it was just, he just wants to have fun. He wants to enjoy the love. Everybody is having a good time. Even those guys, and there's always one who don't know the electric slide. There's always one, and if you look closely, you'll find him. In that video, you will find him.
You know what? It's my sister.
But yeah, he brings that, and it's. But then he chases the alcohol. I don't know if you notice, the barman comes through with his glasses and he chases the drink again. Mm. That's when everybody disappears. But like I say in the documentary, but at this time he gets an opportunity to leave. He's not confined by anything. So this time he gets an opportunity to leave. And for me, the question was, is he leaving or is he arriving somewhere else? Mm-hmm. That for me, that was what I was hoping the question would be at the end. It's like, where's he going to? Is he dead? Is he alive? And then people have asked me all kinds of questions about the end. The end is abstract. It is for you to make up your mind. But one thing's really, really clear at the end that we can't go with. It's a journey he has to take on his own, mm-hmm. wherever that is.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think that whole, in the context of the pandemic and the lockdowns and things, and the fact that it does all happen in that one pub, doesn't it? It's all in that confined space. But actually, we've all, now that we're moving and have moved out of that, we do all have that choice as to, are we leaving? Are we going into something else? I love the way you describe that. Actually, are we leaving something? Or are we stepping into something new? And if we're stepping into something new, then what is that? And how do we make sure that is right?
Yeah.
And I would add to that it has an impact. Because I think personally, there's something about, it doesn't have to be huge, but we should all have an impact. Well, we all do have an impact, and we've got a choice over what that impact is.
Yeah.
And whether it's positive or negative, and whether it's big or small, but we should think about we shouldn't just blunder about the place, having an impact. We should do that consciously. Totally agree. Martin, Thank you so much. As I say, I'm gonna share the links so that people can watch the piece and the documentary. And I think, you know, I really highly recommend that you watch both. Don't just watch the piece, because I think the documentary in itself is incredible. And I will certainly be shouting to try and get more people to watch the piece and to try and get it the platform that it deserves. But thank you so much for your time today. As I say, for people, you know, if you are listening or watching this afterwards, please like and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions for topics for Black All Year, then please let me know. It's blackallyearuk@outlook.com. So thank you so much for your time, everybody, and I hope to see you soon. Take care, everyone.